to hide. I know there's not, because I've seen what the case is built on.
5. Nobody expected the silence to break this fast, and definitely not like this. For weeks, people whispered, argued, and speculated about what really happened the night everything fell apart. But now those whispers have turned into a storm because Candace Owens just dropped something nobody was prepared for. It wasn't a rumor or a vague hint. It was a set of receipts that flipped the whole narrative on its head and put Erika Kirk right in the middle of questions she can't outrun anymore. The strange reactions, the missing footage, the contradictions everyone tried to ignore. Suddenly, they are not just internet theories. They are pieces of a puzzle Candace has started laying out in a way that makes the official story feel thinner by the second. And the wildest part? The moment those receipts hit the internet, people swear Erika's calm, polished exterior cracked for the first time. Not publicly, of course. But insiders say her team went into full alert, scrambling to contain whatever Candace was about to reveal next. It's the kind of shift you feel before you fully understand it. A quiet panic.
Solid case at least, and is saying, show everybody what you have so they can see true evil. Within her capacity of chairman and CEO of Turning Point USA, they could be more transparent about what happened that day. People don't like the stuff that they've seen about Mikey McCoy. They don't
hiding behind composed smiles. Because if these receipts are real, they don't just raise new questions. They reopen every old one that was never answered. The moment the receipts surfaced, the entire tone around the case shifted like someone pulled a curtain back and revealed a scene nobody was ready to see. It wasn't just screenshots or random comments. It was the timing, the tone, the phrasing, and the way certain people responded when they thought nobody was paying attention. What Candace exposed didn't scream guilt on its own, but it created a pattern so uncomfortable that even people who once defended Erika Kirk started pausing before speaking her name. That pause alone said more than any press release could. Because the truth is, everyone remembered how strange those early interviews felt. People tried brushing it off as shock or grief, but something in the way Erika spoke never matched the weight of what happened. The soft voice, the gentle smile, the calm acceptance of the FBI's version. It all sat at odds with the chaos of that night. Nobody expected her to break down on camera, but the absence of urgency, the lack of burning questions about her husband's final moments, that confusion never settled. And now, thanks to Candace, those old unsettling feelings came roaring back as if they'd been waiting beneath the surface the whole time. The receipts weren't dramatic on their own, but they filled the cracks in a timeline people had been side-eyeing for weeks. Tiny inconsistencies suddenly connected. Strange pauses started making sense. People who dismissed
I've come to believe. Courage.
The suspicions weeks ago were now replaying footage, rereading statements, and digging through old interviews with new eyes. The first piece that shattered the internet was the contradiction around the phone call. One moment, Pastor Rob McCoy claimed his son called him immediately after the shooting, saying Charlie had been shot in the neck. The detail was oddly specific for someone who supposedly didn't see the exact moment it happened. Then later, Erika claimed she was the one on the phone with Mikey right after Charlie fell. Both can't be true, yet neither side seemed bothered by the fact their stories didn't line up. Candace highlighted this perfectly. She didn't accuse anyone outright. She just asked how two people standing on opposite ends of the tragedy could share an identical memory while telling completely different stories. And that question lingered in the air like smoke, drifting into every conversation that followed. Then came the issue of Mikey's reaction. People watched the footage dozens of times when it first went viral, but now they were seeing it differently. His lack of shock didn't look like bravery anymore. It looked rehearsed, almost like he knew exactly where not to stand, exactly when not to move, and exactly how to appear uninvolved while everything fell apart around him. Candace pointing it out wasn't surprising, but the way the public reacted this time
Turning Point USA
suddenly,
is continuing.
the clip wasn't just being shared.
We are
it was
so
being
blessed
analyzed.
to have
People zoomed
more
in,
work than
slowed
we
it down,
even-
replayed the silence before the chaos. The calmness felt eerie, too controlled, too aware. The moment Candace mentioned this, comments exploded with people bringing up their own memories of that clip, how they felt something was off but pushed the thought aside because nobody else said it out loud. Now that Candace had, the floodgates opened. And then there was the blood. The detail Pastor Rob insisted on, that Mikey had blood all over him. The kind of detail meant to sound heroic, dramatic, emotional. Except the footage showed nothing like that. His clothes were clean. His hands were clean. No signs he had ever gone near Charlie after he fell, let alone tried to help him. People kept asking why a pastor, someone who stands for truth, would lie about such a thing. What purpose did the lie serve? What was it supposed to make the public believe? Candace didn't accuse him. She didn't need to. She just played the footage, then replayed his words. The contrast did the rest. Interview 253, 255. But the moment that shook everyone came when she revealed the pressure inside Turning Point itself. According to her, staff members were warned not to discuss the events of September 10th, not even...
I've received an unbelievable amount of emails from people that are convinced that Charlie's actually still alive, right? And it's not sad because those people are crazy. They're actually reacting to the lack of emotion and the lack of drive that is coming out of Turning Point USA to figure out who killed him. Yeah, that is how absurd they are acting. Just move on. Just donate to Turning Point USA. This is what Charlie would want.
Even privately. That detail made the entire story twist into something darker. People joked at first, but the laughs faded quickly when more anonymous messages came forward saying the same thing. Suddenly, it didn't feel like one concerned employee exaggerating. It felt coordinated, controlled. Secrets don't protect themselves, they require effort. And someone inside that building was putting in the effort. Candace didn't stop there. She dug deeper, bringing up inconsistencies around donations tied to Erika's Romanian Angels charity. Money moved right before and after the tragedy, labeled as international humanitarian support. But the destinations were vague, and the amounts didn't match the public filings. Then she mentioned a private jet flight involving Erika, Mikey, and 2 unnamed donors, all connected to a shell company disguised as a media coordination group. That detail alone made the public freeze. Why was a media company involved in the timeline surrounding a tragedy? Why were people flying together days before everything happened? Candace didn't pretend to have the answers. She simply said the coincidences were stacking up too quickly to ignore. And then came the eeriest part. The website scrubbing. Old Turning Point blog posts, event pages, donation campaigns connected to Charlie, all quietly deleted. No public explanation. No archived versions left behind. It happened overnight, and the timing was impossible to ignore. Candace mentioned it once, and the internet did the rest. People started pulling up old screenshots, comparing them with the updated site, pointing out every missing detail. It turned from an observation into a digital investigation. More pages vanished the next day. People started counting how many references to Charlie remained. The answer shocked everyone. Barely any. Interview 404, 414. The silence inside Turning Point became deafening. Candace's voice filled that silence. Every time she asked a question, thousands of people echoed it across comments, clips, threads, and duets. The pressure grew with every hour. What began as one voice became a chorus. And through all of this, Erika Kirk remained calm. Painfully calm. While the rest of the world spiraled into confusion, panic, suspicion, and anger, she appeared untouched, almost serene. She spoke of purpose, clarity, and moving forward. She smiled at galas, posed for cameras, and gave interviews that felt strangely rehearsed for someone who had just lost a husband. Those close to her claimed it was strength, but the broader public started questioning whether it was distance, emotional detachment, or something far more complicated, something strategic. Candace, meanwhile, brought up the one thing that made viewers collectively stop breathing: the possibility that Erika's silence wasn't grief, but self-protection. And suddenly, everyone saw the interviews differently. The soft smiles seemed colder. The calm voice sounded rehearsed. The polished appearance felt disconnected from reality. As the timeline twisted deeper, Candace revealed another shocking thread. Tyler Bauer, the Turning Point executive allegedly tied to questionable behavior and orphanage projects in Ukraine, was the same man who first introduced Charlie to Erika. That detail alone felt like a plot line from a political thriller. Too convenient. Too on the nose. Yet it was real. And then the deeper layer came. The similarity between Erika's Romanian charity project and Tyler's alleged involvement in Ukraine. 2 countries, 2 orphanage setups, 2 executives tied to the same inner circle. People started connecting dots that weren't meant to be connected. Donation trails, travel logs, overlapping events, and sudden promotions within the organization. All happening in a tight window of time. Candace didn't present these details as proof of wrongdoing. She presented them as questions. But the weight of those questions was heavy enough to make even the most skeptical viewer uneasy. Interview 525, 550. Then came the moment Texas delegate Tricia Hope stepped forward. She shared how Tyler had personally messaged.
The defense wants to ban cameras in the courtroom. How do you feel about that?
There were cameras all over my husband when he was murdered. There have been cameras all over my friends and family mourning. There have been cameras all over me, analyzing my every move, analyzing my every smile, my every tear. We deserve to have cameras in there. Why not be transparent? There's nothing to hide. I know there's not, because I've seen what the case is built on. Let everyone see what true evil is. This is something that could impact a generation and generations to come.
After she questioned the circumstances around Charlie's death, people couldn't believe it. The coup of a multi-million-dollar organization taking time to respond to a simple Facebook comment? It didn't make sense unless the comment hit too close to something someone didn't want discussed. Trisha asked for basic information, autopsy report, forensic results, recovered bullet details. Tyler brushed it off as made-up stuff. And in that moment, something snapped for viewers. Since when are autopsies considered fictional? Since when are ballistics reports imaginary? Why dismiss questions instead of answering them? Candace replayed that moment like a turning point. Because it was. After that, everything escalated faster than anyone expected. Turning Point insiders went from cold to defensive. Then from defensive to hostile. Legal threats appeared. Gag orders were whispered about. And the smear campaign began, targeting Candace instead of addressing her questions. Postpartum psychosis rumors, claims that she was unstable, attempts to discredit her emotionally. These weren't coincidences. They were tactics, and everyone saw it. Candace didn't flinch. She doubled down, saying if telling the truth made her insane, then call her insane. That line hit the public like a punch to the chest. Comments exploded with support. Her allies multiplied overnight. Meanwhile, Erika stayed silent, her posture steady, her smile unchanged. And the public grew colder. She once seemed like a grieving widow. Now she looked like someone reading from a script written to keep the peace inside a crumbling organization. And through it all, one truth became impossible to ignore. Nothing about this story added up. Too many contradictions. Too many convenient gaps. Too many rehearsed statements. And too many people in positions of power responding like they had everything to lose if the full truth came out. So the only question left was this: how much did Erika know, and how much was she deliberately avoiding? Interview 954, 1037. The pressure around Erika grew heavier with every passing day, not because she said anything new, but because she wasn't saying anything at all. That kind of silence feels different when the world is asking questions. People expected cracks, emotion, some sense of urgency, or even a hint that she wanted answers just as desperately as everyone else. But what they saw instead was a woman moving with calm purpose, attending events, speaking about vision and direction, and stepping deeper into leadership roles that most expected to wait months, maybe even years, before being filled. That shift didn't feel accidental. It felt coordinated. It felt like someone had already mapped out a future that didn't include Charlie long before the tragedy happened. The timing made people uncomfortable. Stepping into a CEO role so quickly, restructuring meetings behind closed doors, strengthening ties with key donors while the investigation remained incomplete, none of it matched the grief the public assumed she would still be carrying. Candace pointed out something subtle but powerful. She said Erika wasn't acting like someone fighting for justice. She was acting like someone defending an institution. And once she said it, viewers couldn't unsee it.
The entire issue and the energy right now is that people, irrespective of what's happening on paper, don't believe the story. They don't believe the story. And you are, and of course this is only a snippet of the interview, so I'm sure more will be said here, but I'm getting that you have seen the case, you think it's a solid case, she thinks it's a solid case at least, and is saying, show everybody what you have so they can see true evil. Within her capacity of chairman and CEO of Turning Point USA, they could be more transparent about what happened that day. People don't like the stuff that they've seen about Mikey McCoy. They don't like what they've seen about
interview. Every quote, every calm smile started looking like a mask. If anything, it made the contradictions hit harder. Charlie's supporters couldn't understand how someone so close to him didn't seem desperate to find out what truly happened. Grief looks different on everyone, but detachment looks the same no matter who wears it. And Erika's calm behavior, paired with the organization's silence, created a void that Candace filled with questions so sharp they cut through every sanitized statement Turning Point offered. The weight of these questions only grew heavier when Candace brought up the surveillance footage. Insiders had revealed there were multiple cameras rolling that night, drones, media feeds, security setups. Yet only shaky cell phone clips made it to the public. Every clip ended right before or right after key moments. The kind of editing that doesn't happen by accident. Interview 1348-1424. Candace asked why the full footage hadn't been released. She didn't demand it. She just asked. And the simplicity of that question created chaos. Viewers started wondering, if Erika truly believed there was nothing to hide, why wasn't she demanding the footage too? Why wasn't she pushing for transparency? If she trusted the case, why not show the world the truth? The lack of urgency didn't sit right. It felt less like trust and more like precision. Then came the most haunting detail, something so unsettling that even neutral observers couldn't brush it aside. Reports surfaced that staff inside Turning Point were instructed not to discuss the night of September 10th. Not at work, not at home, not even in private messages. The kind of rule that only appears when people are afraid of what might slip out. Candace said one thing that echoed through every corner of social media. When people are told not to talk, that's when you know you're close to the truth. And it felt true, even to people who didn't want to admit it. Silence is rarely innocent, especially when it's enforced. The leaks didn't stop. New accounts came forward with small fragments of information, strange commands issued in the hours after the tragedy, hurried meetings, changes to internal systems, and even minor shifts in leadership roles that made no sense in a moment of mourning. Everything felt intentional, like pieces of a puzzle someone scrambled before letting the public see it. Candace didn't accuse Erika of planning anything. She didn't need to. All she did was show how quickly Erika stepped into a future that should have been too heavy to carry that soon. And once people saw it through that lens, they started questioning whether her calm was strength, denial, or something darker, something shaped by the knowledge of what must stay hidden. The part that struck viewers the hardest was something Candace said almost casually. I understand why people believe Charlie might still be alive. The internet froze. Because she wasn't mocking those theories. She was explaining them. She said Charlie supporters weren't delusional, they were reacting to the absence of grief from the people who should have shown it first. Reactions that didn't match the loss. Interviews that felt rehearsed. Statements that dodged the heart of the matter. If Erika behaved like someone who had lost her husband, maybe the theories wouldn't exist. But her calm acceptance of the official story made everything feel off. Candace highlighted Erika's Jesse Wattis interview, the one that spiraled online. Viewers saw the same thing they saw in all her appearances: control. She answered questions smoothly, accepted the assigned culprit without hesitation, and even hinted she had moved on from doubt entirely. It made people uncomfortable. Not because they expected her to sob on television, but because she seemed ready to put the entire tragedy into a closed box and walk into a new chapter without looking back. Candace called it out directly. She asked where the outrage was, where the demand for answers went, where the pressure on authorities had disappeared to. These weren't attacks. They were questions viewers had been too uneasy to ask until someone finally said them out loud. And then came the detail nobody saw coming: the intertwined histories of Erika, Mikey McCoy, and Tyler Bauer. The executive who allegedly introduced Erika to Charlie had his own troubling associations, from questionable orphanage links to accusations of inappropriate behavior with interns. Candace didn't drag his name through the mud. She simply pointed out the irony that the person responsible for connecting Charlie and Erika was now smack in the middle of the questions swirling around Charlie's death. The more people looked at the timeline, the more the connections overlapped. Travel logs, donations, projects, meetings, everything started tangling together like threads pulled from the same knot. 2 orphanage projects in 2 different countries but tied to the same small inner circle? Too strange to ignore. The internet didn't need Candace to push this narrative. They built it themselves, piece by piece. When Trisha Hope shared her story about Tyler personally messaging her, it cracked something open in the public's mind. Why would a high-ranking executive chase down a random commenter unless the comment threatened something fragile? Trisha
also, another person who wrote us was telling me the story about Tyler Boyer's involvement in Maricopa County politics in general. What did he do before in Arizona? And yeah, it's just the kind of stories. He said he approached him several times about embezzlement. Tyler was hooking up with young male interns, or young male workers. And he didn't even care. He's like, I would go on record because all of this happened, and I had the proof that all of this happened. And everybody knows about Tyler Boyer at Turning Point USA. It's like an absurdity. But this is the person that is putting people into places of power at Turning Point.
Asked about autopsies, bullets, and reports, the bare minimum anyone would want to know. Tyler brushed it off. Not with concern or reassurance, but with dismissal. That moment made people question everything. If the truth was simple, why not share it? If the story was solid, why not defend it with facts? Why attack the person asking instead? Candace tied it all together by pointing out a pattern that nobody wanted to see. Every time someone asked a direct question, they were ignored or mocked. Every time someone pointed out a contradiction, they were silenced. Every time a new piece of information surfaced, it vanished or was rewritten. Patterns like that don't emerge by coincidence. They emerge when the truth is dangerous. And the silence from Erika became the centerpiece of the entire narrative. Nobody expected her to shout or rage, but they expected something. Anything. Instead, she leaned deeper into Turning Point's future, aligning with the people being questioned, praising those whose actions confused the public, and continuing forward like the tragedy was a footnote, not a turning point. Interview 1951. Candace said something that hit hard. Grief doesn't erase the need for truth. Silence does. After that, everything changed. People started re-watching Erika's interviews not for comfort, but for clues. Body language experts weighed in. Psychologists commented on detachment. Even former supporters started questioning whether she believed the official story or whether she was protecting it. And then, something shifted inside Turning Point itself. Events were cancelled quietly. Statements became shorter. Certain leaders became less visible. The public noticed the shrinking presence like a shadow pulling back from the light. If everything was simple, why retreat? Why hide? Why adjust the narrative again and again? Candace kept pushing. She hinted at emails, messages, and internal documents that suggested coordination before and after the tragedy. Words like sequence, planning, and post-release strategy appeared in the conversations she referenced. She didn't reveal them fully, maybe because she couldn't yet, but the implications alone cracked the internet open. That gave rise to the most chilling question of all. If the story was coordinated, then who coordinated it? And why? Candace didn't accuse Erika directly. She simply said Erika seemed to trust the people around her more than she trusted the truth. And once she said it, the internet couldn't unsee it. Erika's polite tone began to sound evasive. Her subtle smiles began to look practiced. Her calm acceptance of the official narrative felt rehearsed, like she was choosing comfort over clarity. And maybe the scariest part was that Erika's behavior never changed. Even with the pressure mounting, even with the public demanding answers, she remained untouched. That calm was no longer seen as strength, it looked like certainty. The kind of certainty someone has when they already know the truth, not when they are searching for it. Candace pointed this out gently but firmly. She said if she were in Erika's shoes, she would tear the world apart looking for answers. And the public felt that. Because that's what grief looks like. Messy, desperate, chaotic. Not a polished transition into leadership. Not quiet acceptance. Not rehearsed lines in soft interviews. The question was no longer whether Erika was involved in anything. It was whether she cared enough to question those who were. The strangest shift happened when people started digging into Erika's public appearances before and after Charlie's death. Videos surfaced showing her speaking about courage, mission, and faith, each message wrapped in calm certainty. Viewers didn't think much of it at first, but once the contradictions in the timeline came to light, those old clips began to feel different. They didn't look like glimpses of someone in mourning. They looked like someone already stepping into a role they knew they would soon occupy. The ease, the composure, the steady tone. It sent a chill through people who once offered her the benefit of the doubt. Candace pointed out how Erika had praised Mikey McCoy as an example of courage and leadership. That line raised eyebrows across the internet. How could the man who stood motionless while Charlie collapsed, the man who walked away calmly without offering help, be described as courageous? Candace didn't mock the praise. She dissected it. Why elevate the one person whose reaction made the least sense that night? Why defend him when his behavior was the clearest contradiction in the entire story? And why hadn't Erika questioned him once, at least publicly, even as the footage created waves of confusion? The more people watched that clip, the more uncomfortable they felt. Some said it felt like watching someone recite a script written to protect someone else. Others swore her expression stiffened for a split second when Mikey's name came up, as if she knew what questions would follow. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to make people uneasy. That uneasiness grew when Candace revealed that Erika had taken private meetings with select donors in the weeks after the tragedy. These weren't public gatherings or transparent strategy sessions. They were closed-door discussions that reportedly focused on restructuring Turning Point's leadership model. Insiders whispered that these conversations didn't involve the entire board. They were selective. Intentional. And they unfolded while the public still didn't have basic information about Charlie's death. The timing was what disturbed people most. If Charlie's legacy mattered as much as the organization claimed, why weren't they focusing on ensuring the truth about his death was crystal clear? Why push forward with new leadership frameworks instead of demanding the full release of footage? Why discuss future donations when the unanswered questions of the past were still sitting on the table untouched? Candace didn't accuse Erika of rushing the process for personal gain. She simply highlighted the difference between behavior rooted in grief and behavior rooted in planning. The distinction was subtle but powerful. Charlie's passing felt like a turning point for everyone except the one person whose life should have been shaken apart. And then the strangest layer surfaced. People started noticing how often Erika used the same phrases in interviews. Subtle repetitions about purpose, courage, moving forward, and faith. The kind of lines that feel polished rather than emotional. Viewers noticed she rarely mentioned Charlie's name directly. She spoke about him in broad, gentle terms, almost like a symbol rather than a person. For some, it felt respectful. For others, it felt like distance, like she was gently pulling herself away from someone she once called her soulmate. Candace highlighted this gently, but firmly. She said that when tragedy hits deeply, people cling to details. Names, moments, last conversations. But Erika seemed to avoid specifics. She stayed in the safe space of broad reflections, never crossing into the vulnerability listeners subconsciously expect from someone carrying fresh loss. It didn't make her guilty, but it made the internet wonder what she was protecting: pain, pride, or something else entirely. As the days went on, the internet started collecting inconsistencies like scattered puzzle pieces. Someone noticed that Erika changed her recounting of the shooting's timeline multiple times, first saying she learned through a call from Mikey, then suggesting she heard from people on site, then implying she already understood the sequence of events before speaking with anyone directly. Small changes, but each shift added another layer of confusion. Candace pointed out that grief can cause memory gaps, but it rarely creates conflicting versions told with clarity and confidence. Shifting details usually come with hesitation, pauses, or emotion, not smooth transitions between versions. And that smoothness felt rehearsed. People also started questioning the organization's extreme silence. Not a single press conference after the initial chaos. No updated statements. No community briefings. No timelines released. No new information shared as the investigation progressed. The organization spoke about unity, legacy, and purpose, but not about evidence, footage, or answers. Candace said the quiet didn't feel like mourning. It felt like management. And that one line reshaped the entire conversation. Slowly, former Turning Point supporters began speaking up. Small comments at first, confusion, discomfort, doubts. Then longer posts expressing distrust in leadership and disappointment that the organization hadn't shown the same urgency the public felt. People said Charlie had carried Turning Point on his shoulders for years, yet after his death, the organization seemed more focused on maintaining its image than protecting his memory. And the Erika questions didn't stop. People dug deeper, finding contradictions that seemed almost invisible the first time around. The way she described the shooter's motive. The confidence she had in the FBI's version before the investigation was fully laid out. The subtle way she dismissed inconsistencies as misunderstandings even though the public could see the gaps clearly. Candace pointed out how unbothered Erika seemed by the contradictions. Most spouses would push for clarity, press for answers, demand transparency. But Erika accepted the narrative quietly and almost gratefully. The contrast was jarring, especially when paired with Turning Point's insistence on moving forward and erasing digital traces of Charlie's final events. The strangest part was that Erika never once challenged the organization's silence. Not publicly, not subtly, not even in passing. She spoke about faith. She spoke about strength. But she never spoke about the investigation except to say she trusted it, even when key details didn't make sense. Candace said something chilling: trust without evidence isn't faith. It's compliance, and the public agreed. The next major shift came when Candace hinted she had emails referencing planned sequences and post-release strategies. The internet erupted. Because those aren't words used during emergencies. They are words used in marketing, media planning, and controlled narratives. If those emails were real, it meant people inside Turning Point already had frameworks in place for what would happen after Charlie was gone. The implications were horrifying. Candace didn't release the full emails. But she didn't have to. The idea was enough to ignite panic inside the organization. And that panic became visible. Leaders who once spoke confidently on social media suddenly reduced their presence. Staff members locked their accounts. Certain names disappeared from internal directories. And most telling of all, Erika herself became quieter, more selective with her appearances, more controlled with her answers. People noticed. And every withdrawal felt like another piece of a truth someone didn't want the world to see. Turning Point's public presence shrank even further when people discovered that multiple event posters, articles, and video thumbnails featuring Charlie had disappeared. Some were archived by users, proving they existed. Others were gone without a trace. The erasure didn't feel like tribute. It felt like distancing. And when you distance yourself from someone, it often means their story is tangled in ways you don't want connected. Candace highlighted a point nobody had noticed before. During the most crucial moments, the organization praised everyone except the one person people wanted answers from. They praised donors, staff, executives, even unnamed contributors. But they never encouraged Erika to speak out, ask questions, or demand proof. They treated her like a symbol of unity, not a grieving spouse seeking justice. The more Candace connected the dots, the clearer the pattern became. Silence from leadership. Silence from Erika. Silence from those who were present that night. And heavy pressure on anyone who tried to speak up. Silence like that isn't born from confusion. It's born from fear. Candace said if she had to choose between comfort and truth, she would choose truth every time. And that's what separated her from the people she was questioning. She didn't have a narrative to protect. She wasn't tied to donors, boards, or reputations. Her only loyalty was to clarity, even if it meant tearing down the walls others were desperately trying to keep standing. People realized Erika's calm wasn't the calm of someone who had processed grief. It was the calm of someone who didn't want to disturb something fragile. Maybe she was protecting people she trusted. Maybe she was afraid of what the truth might expose. Or maybe she already knew the answers the public was trying to uncover. Whatever the reason, her silence became the loudest part of the entire story. And the deeper the public looked, the more every unanswered question pointed back to the same unsettling reality. Nothing about Charlie's final night made sense. Not the timeline. Not the footage. Not the reactions. Not the leadership shifts. Not the sudden erasure. And definitely not the calm acceptance from the person who should have been fighting harder than anyone else. Candace didn't claim to know what happened. She simply showed the world that the people in power weren't acting like the truth mattered. And once the world saw that, they couldn't unsee it. The deeper this story goes, the harder it becomes to pretend any of this feels normal. Too many moments don't fit. Too many reactions don't align. Too many voices have been pushed aside while a carefully shaped narrative took center stage. And in the middle of everything sits a silence that grows heavier every time someone tries to explain it away. People wanted answers. They still do. Because none of this is small. None of this is forgettable. What happened to Charlie wasn't a minor event or a passing moment. It was a life torn away in front of witnesses, followed by a timeline built on half answers and conflicting stories that never settled into anything solid. And the people who claimed to care the most somehow became the quietest the moment the questions got uncomfortable. Candace didn't create the doubt. She just refused to pretend it wasn't there. She pushed against a wall everyone else tiptoed around, and that pressure started revealing cracks nobody expected. Her persistence didn't come from chaos or spite. It came from something simple: respect for the truth and for a man whose last moments should matter more than anyone's reputation. And that's why this isn't over. Because every time someone tries to bury a piece of the story, another thread comes loose. Every time someone changes their version, another hole appears. And every time someone stays silent, people wonder what answer they are afraid to face. Something bigger is sitting under the surface, waiting for the moment it can't be contained anymore. And when it finally breaks through, the shock won't just hit one person or one organization. It'll ripple across everyone who thought they could keep the truth small enough to control. So if you've followed this far, don't stop now. Hit like, drop your thoughts in the comments, share this video so more people see what's unfolding, and make sure you're subscribed. Because the moment the next piece drops, you'll want to be right here when it lands.